So I've been having these issues with various social media outlets, including YouTube, although this channel has done remarkably better than I would have suspected. Um, there's good reasons for that, but my Twitter account is a mess, and it always was. And they did this whole like sign up for us, Elon's taken over. You can get monetized. Met all the requirements. Set me in review for months. Tried to contact them. They didn't even get back to me. It was about 2 years ago. So recently, I just got angry. I was pissed off. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. We get the StreamYard going on. Nothing's working. Um, Contacted them. The bot actually got back to me. I'm like, oh, now your AI works. That's fantastic. Why didn't it work 2 years ago? Now, I got frustrated with the bot because I kept saying, here are the things that are wrong. And I said, can you give me exact names and data? No, I can't. You have the records. I don't even have those records. I don't even have access to that stuff. Well, I don't have access to it, says the bot. I'm like, well, what are we doing? Why are we here? What's the purpose? Like, what's going on? So I finally got really pissed off with the bot. And I said, look, the account's being shadow banned. We don't shadow ban. Within an hour, my entire Twitter feed changed. The whole thing. I was like, what? Okay. And the bot said, we don't shadow ban. I'm referring this to a human. I'm like, great, refer to a human. They'll get back to you as soon as, but it has not gotten back to me still. Still. Been days. I'm like, okay, I guess you're not getting back. I guess that was a lie too. But it got me to thinking about shadow banning and what this all means. And when you have the low cognition, low intellect people, which is like almost everybody online at this point, which is unfortunate. It should be the other way around. It's not anymore. What happens is they think that the algorithm controls. Boy, that's not correct, but okay. What you see and what you don't see, and it's like, well, no. There are whole books about this. You could, if you could read them, right? But you don't. Obviously, you don't research. So maybe you can read, but you don't read. Same problem, right? The algorithm responds very much to the data that it has. And so what are the various ways that your feed could be manipulated? Like, what are all the factors, we'll say, that go into this? Because it's not a simple straight one-to-one. The algo did it to me, man, right? I've written algorithms, many of them. It's not the way it works. It's just not the way it works, right? In some circumstances, the algorithm can be the sole determiner of what you see and don't see. That's true. But in a sophisticated system with feedback, no. One of the top things that determines your feed is what you like and what you view and what you stay viewing, or what the machine thinks you're staying viewing. That's why if you have what I call a very sparse account, so you could do this experiment yourself if you weren't lazy, but you are, which is why you don't know this. This is why I have to tell you, right? You can set up an account with different email, put it in a Docker container or some stupid thing. If you wanted to, I'd prefer VMs personally. Buy a VPS, put it in the cloud, whatever, right? Just have an independent system. Don't pollute it with any of your personal login information. Just use this brand new email account, Gmail or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Just use that, right? And you could even set up some automation to do it randomly, whatever, and then see what feeds you get. Sign up for accounts with all these things and see what feeds you get, right? And then you can start liking certain types of things. Like one of the things I've done this experiment many times. I know how to manipulate all these algorithms. It's not foolproof. It doesn't do what I want because there's other factors, which I'll get into. I liked all the landscape pictures for a while on Twitter. Got nothing but landscape pictures. In a third of my feed was landscape pictures. It was great. Flowers and whatever, which was great. And then I was posting flowers, and that was wonderful. It worked fantastically well. So you have a great deal of control over the algorithm. But it's worth thinking, what else has control? So see, the number one thing that doesn't really have that much control, and that is the company. First of all, there's no such thing as the company. A company is a bunch of people in different roles, doing different things, having different impacts, and having different degrees of freedom. Now, of course, valid point. There can be bad actors, right, who hack in internally. That we know that happened internally. We know. We just don't know if they've all gotten caught, if all the back doors have been plugged. So another factor which people don't understand for what determines your feed is information from other social media platforms. So the dirty little secret is not they're selling your data. Oh my God. Of course they're selling your data. You're an idiot. It's public though, so they might as well monetize it. If you knew how to make money, you'd be making money off of publicly available data too. But you don't know that, which is why you're watching this. Fair enough. The problem is that anything is worth more in aggregate than it is as individual pieces. That's why when you go to get, your basic attention token dollars from Brave, which I get, you get a few pennies, right? But that same information bundled with a bunch of other information from only maybe 500,000 people is worth $1 million. But individually, right, plus to me the data is not worth anything. It's my data. I already had it. You're selling me back my data. Okay. Really? But you're not, right? You're sharing advertising revenue. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's better than selling me back my data. But it's pennies. Whereas the data that the advertisers ask for, whether it's useful to them or not, by the way, because people always assume people only do things that work and work a certain way and have a certain, we'll say, level of value. That's not how anything works in a corporation, right? It's just, there are some corporations that work that way, but almost none of them do, right? Most corporations are full of retarded people who barely know how to tie their shoes, and they're put in a very difficult position, which they may actually be really good at, despite not being able to tie their shoes. Another thing people have a hard time understanding. And most of them are not good at it. And you could be the best technician in the world or the best technician in the company, which I have been many times because it's not that hard. It's a low bar. But if the people around you don't do their work, your work is less valuable. Right. The life sucks. It's a bear. These people control things. The data flooding in from the other social media feeds, which may or may not be accurate, by the way, because there's a lot of bugs, could contain information that either metadata, so it was injected or created, right? Or it could be corrupted data in some subtle way that doesn't look wrong, right? But it's corrupted somehow, like all the people that clicked on a Frito-Lay's ad or lingered on a Frito-Lay's ad because they look at how long you scroll, right? Oh, you stopped here. You must have been reading this ad, right? I mean, those are very imprecise algorithms, by the way, for most use cases, not for full screen things, not for swipey things, but for scrolly things. They're very imprecise. And then instead of registering it to Frito-Lay, they registered it to Coca-Cola. And so they thought it was a soft drink ad. These things, I know for a fact, I was in the advertising industry for a brief time. The number of errors was staggering. And of course, they're dealing with billions of records per day. So, a 0.1% error rate is a lot of errors, right, for peoples. And so that could be corrupted. The metadata could be corrupted. They could have an explicit list of banned list. That seems likely to me only because when they were doing the mass bannings and they were all announcing at the same time these mass bannings, the bannings had already been done. So you look at Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, right? That sort of thing. All the social medias had already banned him and then came out and said they were banning him, right? And he wasn't the only one, obviously. There were a bunch of them. saying, oh, these people are right-wing extremists, or these people are, anti-vaccine, or whatever excuse of the day they were using, right? And they'd ban them all. But they had already been banned. And if you were on enough social media platforms, you noticed they all got banned right about the same time. Now, doesn't have to be. It might not be a list. It might be a metadata flag that says, according to Facebook, this person posts, right-wing stuff, right? Now, Facebook standards and Twitter standards might be different. And if Twitter doesn't reassess the standards, they could have accepted that. And, they think you're a Nazi. Facebook just thinks you don't vote for Democrats. That there's some of that definitely happening, right? But that's a flag. And that's a problem more of mismatched standards and also believing your vendors, because you shouldn't have them as vendors you don't believe them. So, there's a trade-off there for sure. And there's another factor. There's the bad actor factor, where somebody could put you on a list that you don't belong on. People do this all the time, right? They'd subscribe you for magazines. They'd put you on TSA lists. That happens. People do that. I know for a fact it happens. I've seen it has been done to people, right? And that's not great. So each company likely has a list like that, right? And so if there's a bad actor in there and they slip you on that list, it's done. It's over. Right. So see all these different factors. And then there's another factor. There's the factor of whether or not those individual companies buy data and what data they buy and how they process the data. Now I'm not saying there isn't an algorithm to do that. I'm saying that's not, quote, the algorithm, right? There's not one algorithm running something like Twitter. That's not happening. There's all kinds of data ingestion algorithms. There's all kinds of feed algorithm. There's all kinds of algorithm around, well, how do you handle complaints? Poorly, because we don't know how to write that algorithm. And our customer support department doesn't actually do customer support or anything. They just tell you they're going to do that, and then your case gets lost yet again. And that could be a function of shadow banning too. I find it odd that I accuse Twitter of shadow banning, and the robot says, we don't shadow ban, and immediately my feed changes. Then that doesn't mean I was being shadow banned. It could mean they were like, oh, we need to loosen up the restrictions on his feed to make him feel better. Fair enough. Like, they got to do something. They don't want me pissed off. I pay them some money, even if it's not much. So it's not a sign that they're shadow banning necessarily, but there's lots of things that might look like shadow banning, whether they're actual shadow banning or not. And I don't think people appreciate that. But I wanted to give you at least a little bit of the insight. I've been inside some of these companies. I know exactly what they do in some cases. And many of them follow the same patterns because they're not going to invent something new. There's very few new things under the sun. And, there's structures that have to be in place. Like, in order to use algorithms, you need lists. You got to have lists, right? You got to have a way to sort the list and store the list and grab the list and make the list active when the user logs in and all this crazy stuff. Like, those things ain't changing. And they're subject to certain things. And you've got to have vendors. You've got to ingest data from somewhere, right? You've got to get your feedback from somewhere, right? Other people can downvote you. I probably talked about this before, but I don't know how credible this is because I wasn't there and I didn't talk to these people. But according to somebody on Twitter, I'm pretty sure it was Twitter, when the Joe Rogan Trump conversation came out and it didn't appear on YouTube and you couldn't find it in the YouTube search. The reason, according to them, because they had an engineer friend at Google look at it, was because the video had been downvoted hundreds of times before it was posted, or right as it was posted. Now, that could be robots. That could be an active group within YouTube. That could be a group in China. Who knows? It's hard to say because there's lots of stuff going on. But just that one action of initially downvoting something very, very quickly could cause it to come off the feeds and be scrubbed from the search engine. Now, I'm not saying that definitely happened. I don't know. But I'm telling you for sure from a technical perspective, absolutely the algorithm will respond to that. Because some of these companies are very wise, like Google, and they have time-activated algorithm stats, which means if they, and there's bugs in these algorithms, right? Like there's a bunch of stuff they don't do right, for sure. No one does them right, because it would just take some extra code, and they're not going to put the code in because it has side effects, right? So, for example, I don't believe you should be able to like a video or dislike a video until you've watched it for more than 60 seconds. Like, I think the buttons should be completely freaking disabled, right? That would just fix a bunch of things, right, in the stats. The problem with that is your view stats would go down. Now, I'm willing to make that trade-off because I'd rather have pure data about real likes and dislikes, or at least a better chance at it. I know for a fact YouTube doesn't do that. I know for a fact. Now, I'm also fairly sure the last time I did the test, and because you can test this stuff if you're clever enough and you know what you're doing, that they do respond immediately to up and down votes. Like that gets propagated through the system pretty freaking quick, quicker than views, which makes sense. First of all, it's a binary flag. Second of all, it's more important data to get out. And I think because of that, I doesn't look to me like they propagate it through the same mechanism as they propagate. Certainly not comments, but even the way they propagate views, their view propagation system. I mean, I've seen 3 different numbers on the Google systems all at the same time, and I'm like, well, I know why that happens, but also this is stupid. There's no reason for this. But with likes and dislikes, no, that number changes on a different frequency and everything. Like it doesn't update on the same time schedule. So it's a different transport mechanism for sure. And you look, that could change at any time. It might already be different. I don't know. I don't test it all the time. I don't care that much. But that means if you got 400 downvotes within the first minute of the thing being posted, or even the first few seconds, it would absolutely take that off of feeds. And if it kept getting downvotes over time, especially with watch time, right? So with 3 minutes of watch time or something, and they downvote it with the first 3 minutes or stop watching, that would suppress the video all by itself. The algorithm doesn't, quote, do that. It's the feedback mechanism from other people that do that. And then, man, bang, this one of the most popular videos, interviews of all time, is scrubbed effectively from the Google search engine and from the YouTube search engine. YouTube's the second largest search engine in the world, last I checked, although that might change with AI. That's a big deal. But that's because, if you know how to manipulate the numbers, the algorithm is yours, not theirs. There's always been a battle for the algorithm. The algorithm, right? All the people making money using the algorithm are laughing their ass off. They're like, yeah, the algorithm's doing whatever, and you're not using it to make money. You're a fool. That's what they think. I've seen them talk about that before. They're like, you're a complete fool. It's easy to use the algorithm to make money. The algorithm's not your problem. Your interface with the algorithm might be the problem, but the algorithm can be used any way you want with certain tiny limitations, but they're kind of small. So don't be complaining about the algorithm. Don't be complaining about the shadow banning. I did that on purpose, mainly because I'm a manipulative bastard when I'm pissed off. And it worked. So bingo. It hasn't fully worked because still shadow banned on all the platforms. But it's good to understand these things are complex, not complicated. Complex. They're not. Video games are complicated. This is complex because it involves a number of different feedback mechanisms and channels that you don't have control over. There's your feedback. There's feedback from the audience. There's feedback from your previous stream. There's feedback from your look time. There's feedback from bugs, bad data, engineers in the system, classification systems that are apart from the algorithm that you're right wing or whatever. All that happens. And of course, the worst part about all this is that ultimately what's going on is the crowd itself manipulates the algorithm as a whole. And so if leftism is particularly popular with people online, you're going to see a lot of that online. You won't see a lot of it in the mainstream media. Go, oh, the mainstream media is not reporting all the trans shootings. Okay. The mainstream media is also not reporting all the Puerto Rican shootings. There's probably about the same number, by the way. Why pick one over the right? Right. Because there's a lot of trans traffic, trans attention online right now, which is horrible. It just makes me want to burn the internet down. But it's been different in the past. And if you've been on the internet 4 decades like I have, you know this because you've seen it. So there's lots of factors. There's lots of things going on. Reddit and IRC probably still own the internet. So if you don't know what IRC is and you don't like track Reddit somehow, you probably can't understand what's going on the internet. You think it's Facebook or Twitter or something. And nah. I mean, they're in ascendancy. Twitter is in particular to some extent, but it's not going to last for various reasons. There are structural problems with the way Twitter operates, the theory behind how it operates. And as an attention machine, it can get attention, but it can't hold attention. And so it will never hold attention the way Reddit does. It may still usurp Reddit. And it's too bad 4chan blew itself up, but that used to run a lot of the internet. But it doesn't anymore. I don't know all the things to do. I don't track that stuff anymore. It's kind of boring, actually. And it's not like knowing about it, you're going to change it anyway. There's a lot of people involved in that. You're only one person. So now if you get a group together, then we can talk.